signing in. If you haven't signed in yet, please do so before you leave. We just like to get a count of who's all here and get an idea. I guess first the thing is, at our meetings, we always like to stand for the pledge, so I guess we'll do that first. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So I guess one thing we'll try to do this time, we didn't do it our last meeting. We didn't stand up, and I think it was kind of hard for some of you people to hear it in the back. So I'll try to do that, and if you guys can't hear, please let us know, and we'll try to do better. A couple things just before the meeting starts here, or as we're starting. First, thanks for coming out tonight. It's good for you. I appreciate you taking your time out of your evening to come here and give us your thoughts. What we're going to kind of do here, the process is we're going to first do a little quick presentation about, Chris has put us a PowerPoint of why we're making the decision to look at this avenue as far as possible incorporation. We're going to follow that up with questions for anybody who wants to have a question. And just as an order of how we're going to do that, if you have a question, we're going to kind of go around and everybody who wants to ask one before you come back to anybody for a second. So we'll do that. There is a form in the back with questions. If you want to have questions, if you're not comfortable saying something in the meeting here, just go ahead and fill it out. You can leave it here tonight and we can try to get back to you later. You can leave your phone number. There's a thing just about your opinion on whether you're interested or you think it's a good idea or not. It's not an official vote. We're just trying to get a sense of what you guys think. So just check yes or no if you'd like. And just like I said, it's just trying to get an idea of what you all think. The last item I want to say that we didn't really state at the first meeting too, but I want to make sure it's a little bit more understood is, our township has a number of different things going on right now. We have we're looking at possibly exiting the joint plowers board to do our own individual planning. That's one item. We have a sewer and water project that we're still pursuing and looking at to see if we can make that happen on the north side of Lake Bemidji with cooperation with the city, possibly, and with the DNR, with Rutgers and a number of different entities. So that's another subject. And then we're also looking at this new subject about incorporation. They're all separate, but they're all kind of intertwined as far as to leading us why we're kind of doing these things. So even though it's not exactly what this is about, those other topics, they are correlated, or they're all kind of tying together, I guess, as we go through it. I guess with that being said, I'll let Chris start out here with giving a little presentation for you guys.
All right, thank you, Jess. And you have a few people signed on, FYI, up here too. So I'm trying to share my screen there too, so bear with me if I'm going between computers. I want to make sure they can see it too, anybody who's on the Teams call with us. So as Jess was saying, we're here to talk about incorporation tonight, and as he alluded to too, I mean, there's lots of other issues that are kind of intertwined with this, but I'm going to try to give you a good overview of why we are even here talking about incorporation. We have had this, from what I've been told, we've had this come up several times over the years. Mary was even saying, let's say it stretches back like maybe 30 years or something from when the first time a town board had broached the issue and even talked to some legal lawyers and whatnot about the issue. That being said, in the past few years now, especially, there's been a lot of things coming to a head, and it really has made us take a hard look at this again. And the reason why this is here before you tonight is because this is what we think is going to really check all those boxes that would potentially help us with all of these problems, issues, whatever you want to call it. And as you can see right up here at the top, would really help us just put us in control of our own future. And that's hopefully the big takeaway I want everybody to take away from this tonight is that we want that to be the case. We want to be able to determine how and where we grow as a community. And one of the big reasons that that is the case and why we need to talk about it through this avenue of incorporation is because it's going to, if we do go forward with this plan and are successful, solidify our current land that we have in the township and our tax base. As it stands right now, I'm sure many of you remember, we were talking last year, just a month or so ago in a year, about potentially being annexed with some of our sections of the township into the city. And you can imagine that it's pretty hard to plan bigger projects just in general when you're not exactly sure how much money you're gonna have coming into your township year after year. So that's definitely one of the big benefits with incorporating is that you're gonna set those boundaries. Annexation is off the table at that point. And you maybe know, maybe you don't, but unfortunately the way that the law is written in our state, and it's probably common in other states too, with annexation, townships really just don't fare well in that. They don't really have a whole lot to say. And there's ways that even against the will of the people of the township that you can end up losing some of your land and of course your tax base with that too. Going the incorporation route, once you become city, again, you're setting those borders. That can't happen anymore. And you're also setting your tax base. It really helps with us being able to continue doing what we're doing, provide all the services that we're providing to you right now, but then also look ahead to the future and what other types of things as a community we might want to offer. Longer term projects, things that might even require some sort of investments. Some more reasons about why we actually think incorporation is best for our situation right now. One is that we provide all the services that you would typically see a city provide. When you actually go through the final steps of applying for this incorporation, there's a whole long document that you'll fill out, and you're going to give basically your reasons why you think that you should be a city. And one of the big reasons that they want to see on there is that you're functioning as a city. So when you stop and take a look at the services that we're already providing, you know, this includes law enforcement, fire, taking care of our roads, things like that. These are things cities do, and these are things that we're already doing, checking those boxes, if you will. Another one is when you just stop and take a look at the size of our township. We're a big township. There's a few in the state that are bigger than us, but not many. And if you actually took a look at the cities that are out there in the state, last I checked, we would be in the top 20% of populations for cities in the state, if we became a city today, that is. So 4,500 plus residents is what the last census numbers that we got, that was just this past year. And that's growing, of course, too. And then probably one of the biggest benefits to becoming a city would be that you're gonna have some extra avenues of funding available to you that you don't have as a township. On the screen here, you can see two of the more common ones, local government aid, municipal state aid. And I'll mention it again here in a little bit, but there have been some other recent incorporations that we've looked at. There's been actually two in just the past year and a half, let's say. And you can go online and look at all their records, the documents they submitted for it and everything. And you'll see in there that when they're making their case, this is definitely one of the reasons that they were trying to do what they did, is that you do have some more monies available to you as a city that you don't as a township. And in the one case, I think they had estimated it was going to be about like $70,000 or so of revenue coming in that they didn't the year before. We of course don't know what that number is at this point. If we do proceed with this, those are going to be the details that we're definitely working out, and they'll be part of our application. So we will know those numbers, and definitely plan on sharing that with you all as we get them. So then moving next into what the process would look like. And again, this is just a really general overview, but you can at least get a feel for what it would look like. Right up the top here is what we're doing right now. It's a public meeting because we want to get your feedback. Again, this is a recommendation. As we looked at things, we thought this is going to be one of our best options moving forward. But we want to get everybody's feedback here because we're all a community. This isn't just us making this decision. And if everybody came back at us tonight and said, there's no way, this just isn't what we want to do, we're going to stop. You know, we don't want to do something against your wishes. So right off the bat there, public meeting. Then the next thing that would potentially happen would be at the board level here, one of our upcoming meetings. If everybody comes back like, yep, we want to do this, we would potentially pass a resolution formalizing that we want to do this as a township. Then probably the most important step in this, and especially from feedback that we've gotten from other entities that have gone through this process, is that we would notify all the surrounding communities. So that would be Bemidji, of course, any of the townships that are directly adjacent to us, and even some of the others that are just in the area. And we'd be asking for their support. It is a judge that actually hears these cases. It doesn't happen, say, by citizen votes, or it doesn't go down to like the state legislature. It's a single judge who hears the case. And that's going to be one of the big things that they're going to want to see. They want to know that your neighbors, other people in the area here, are in support of you. Then, in addition to that, we would also have to put this packet together, kind of that I've been alluding to. There's really kind of three broad categories I saw it as. There's just some legal things in there. There's things related to financing, what your budget looked like in the past, what it could look like in the future, and then also planning, which just to briefly touch on it, I'm sure most of you heard, we did recently tell the city of Bemidji that we're interested in exiting from the joint planning board. We have done planning and zoning jointly with the city for the past 10, 15 years. As part of this process, we'll have to show how we do that and that we can do that. And that's something that we're already planning on doing anyways. So it's going to be coming back to the township, which is what we used to do, my understanding, several, 15 plus years ago. So we'll just have to write down what that looks like for that process. And then, as I mentioned, this is something that an administrative judge through the state will hear our case, and they actually go out to the community that's requesting this. So there's a specific judge who's hearing all these cases nowadays. I'm forgetting her name right now, but she would come up here. They would have another meeting, and anybody who wants to come and give their opinion at this meeting can do so. And then she's going to review all of the information, kind of get a sense of what the community is like, and then she'll make a decision. She writes the opinion, gives a decision. It's a public record, everybody can see. And then if it was successful, there would be an election. So just to clear that up, it's not something where, like, if this went through, that we would just become the new city council. You actually would have a special election. You would elect a new mayor and a new council. My guess is it would probably be like a 5-person setup, kind of like we have now, but we don't know all those details for certain. And then after that election, that judge would come back out to the community a month, 2 months later, whatever it may be, and they actually swear in those group of people who were elected. We would adopt the city charter, and at that time, when that happens, that's when you actually officially become a city. So this is, of course, just an estimate, but our best guess at this point is if we started this process and went at it, pretty vigorously, probably would take about 1 year to 2 years. Of course, there's things that we can't foresee, and maybe that would be longer, maybe it'd be shorter. Just from other experience of what we've seen other cities go through recently too, that seems to be about the general timeline. So then just kind of trying to anticipate a few of the questions here. I'm sure you guys are gonna have plenty of others, and we're happy to answer them. But looking first here at the category of what things would potentially change. I forgot I wasn't doing this too, sorry. Okay, so as I just mentioned, we would have a different government setup here, right? We would have a mayor and a council, and that would replace the Township Board of Supervisors. That would be done through a special election. So it's not us that determines this. This is the people, right? It's done through a vote. We already have mayor or township clerk. If we were a city, that position would become the city clerk or assistant, however you want to label it. So that isn't necessarily going to be a new position, just kind of a new title. Should be doing the same things that she's doing now, obviously, or whoever does down the road. We, as I mentioned, we're talking about taking back this planning from the city in that joint effort we were doing before. So as part of that process, we're going to end up having some sort of a planner that's going to help with all of that here. In addition to that, we'll just put it on there because it's a possibility. We don't really know for sure, but I could see down the road where we would have need of maybe a public works person. Could very easily just be that same person who's doing the planning and zoning too. Maybe it's kind of a joint thing. Those are just some details that I guess we would have to kind of see as things played out. So then another category is what would stay the same. And so here's another point where I just want to pause and make sure that everybody kind of really gets a good sense of what we feel like is going into this as a board. That when we ask this question, what would stay the same? In our eyes, it's most everything. We really do feel, we're a small community. We're not a city the size of Bemidji. We're not a city the size of what you see down in the suburbs. And at least our intent is that we don't necessarily want to become one of those. Not that there's anything wrong with that. We're just different, right? We're a much more rural community. And we fully expect that that would stay the same. From some of the other cities that we've heard that have gone through this process, that's been part of their reasoning too, is they wanted to keep that rural character. And as far as we know, there's no reason why you can't do that. Another really big question I'm sure that everybody has is what would happen with our taxes? As it stands right now, we don't anticipate that there would really be any tax increase. Part of the reasons why I would go ahead and say that is that looking at some of those other cities I mentioned that have gone through this recently, they said the same thing. And you take a look at all the services that we offer, we're going to be offering the same services. So we don't really see too many spots where there might be a potential increase. And then another point probably to pause here and mention too, is that over the past 10 whatever plus years it's been, we just exited out of orderly annexation process with the city of Bemidji. And during that time, they're actually paying us money as part of the annexation agreement. And that's, this property is a little bit on the south end of our township here. Those payments are done. So as a board, we've actually already been anticipating these, coming few years here, that we're going to have a little bit less money to work with year after year. So we've already been trying to plan ahead and what kind of projects can we do? Where do we need to scale back on? Just throwing that out there because it's not like it's an unlikely scenario at all that our taxes aren't going to increase as it stands anyways right now. We're already trying to make do with potentially less money coming in. So that being said, I don't necessarily see this process adding any new reason for why taxes would go up, other than what just is already going on in the township to begin with. And then next on here is just a look at some of the services, again, that I've already mentioned, we're already offering. These are the things that you have to prove that you are basically functioning as a city with. We would probably continue to contract law enforcement with the county. We'll participate in the Rural Fire Association, which we already have been doing, maintaining our roads. And then I mentioned also the planning and zoning, which is going to be a little bit of a new change, but that's something we're doing regardless if we became a city or not. We're just taking that back over, doing it in-house. Last here is what are our anticipated chances of success. Of course, we wouldn't come to you if we thought that they were bad. I really do feel like there's plenty of reasons to be optimistic. And one of them, again, is just that we're providing all these services that cities typically provide. As I mentioned, we have a very large township population-wise, and we would be a pretty decently sized city, in a rural area. And then our budget is pretty big too. When you stop and think about it, we've had over $1 million budget for the past few years here. So then the last thing I think that's probably worth to highlight here is, again, there's been a few cities in just the past couple of years, townships that incorporated, became cities, Credit River and Empire. I think they're both in the south end of the state. Credit River, I believe, is right next to Prior Lake. And if you read through the document that they submitted and then the judge's findings for their case, there's just so many similarities, I feel like, between them and us. They're just slightly bigger than we are. That Empire one, actually, they're smaller than we are. They offer about the same level of services. They had the same problems with, potentially being annexed parts of their town. And so they went through this process because they wanted to do the same thing. They wanted to set their borders, stabilize their tax base, and then be able to hopefully serve their community better. So hopefully we can get that up on our own website too. So for those who are interested, they can go there. And we'll get a whole section up on there too, in fact, where you'll be able to see any of the questions you guys are asking us tonight, other related documents, things like that. You can read through them and hopefully get a better sense of everything as well. And I believe, just let me double check. Yeah, that is everything. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Jess.
All right, thanks, Chris. So I guess like the process that we'll do now, I want to open it up, or we all do want to open it up for you guys to ask questions or make a comment if you'd like. First thing, just when you do that, could you just make sure you state your name? That'd be important to just state your name and then we'll go from there. So I think you're first. Go ahead, please.
My name is Pat Dockendorf. My wife and I live on Lakewood Drive and we're next in the firing line.
Okay.
Annexation, it says 1 to 2 year process. Does this halt all annexation attempts?
We talked about this before, like I don't know this exactly how the rules are exactly, but from what our understanding is that once you start the process, which isn't like, no, once you file the resolution, then they no longer can be annexed once you start that process.
You can't quick go gobble, gobble,
No,
gobble.
that's not a for sure understanding, but that's what we understand it as. So we would probably, that's a question that was asked earlier today, that we are going to research that and find that out. Yes, ma'am.
Stanton, I live on Large Street. So how much of this, if you can give me an idea, percentage-wise, being driven by the need to upgrade septic along the lake?
I'll start with that, Mike, or do you want to go me too?
Thank you. Good question. How much is being driven by the need for municipal services or the want of municipal services is a question, and pertaining especially from Northwoods Landing up to the DNR building. That's a big thing that's going on right now. This links in with that because it did force us to as a board, to either provide those services or allow that area to be annexed. So we're working very hard on trying to procure state and federal bonding so that we can move those services forward. It's not directly related to the incorporation issue, but it does tie together. The incorporation issue is that if we don't set our own boundaries, if we don't become a small city, it leaves us wide open We have no way that we can say you can't annex that portion of the township, especially if those people are requesting it. If they say, if we go into the city of Bemidji, we can get water and sewer right. Well, some don't. At least this way, we can set our boundaries and we can decide and we can work towards that solution. So to say it's 10% or 50% or whatever, I can't give you a number, but it did push us, it pushed this board off dead center. I've been on this board for a long time, and this question has arisen many times. We worked through the first go around with orderly annexation, 15-year process. And we believed when we finished with orderly annexation that Northern Township was pretty safe from any further annexation for a little while. Well, the ink wasn't dry. The first round of taxes weren't collected, and the next, they were already moving towards further annexation. So that made this board stop, rethink, are we ready to take the next step? And we've just decided that, as a board, if the residents support it, that is a step that we want to look at.
The only thing I'll offer to that, to add to that too, is we did, when that question was brought forward, I'm sure a number of you were at our meeting back about a year ago, and we heard overwhelmingly that people weren't interested in that. So that pushed us even further into that decision. If there would have been a strong push from the residents saying, yeah, we're interested in being annexed and we're fine with that, but that wasn't the case. That's not what we got. So based on what we've heard from past comments, that's kind of driven us to this point too. Anybody else? No. Yes, sir.
Randy McGuire, my wife Betty and I live up in Four Seasons, Autumn Drive. I have a two-part question. Looking at the map of the township over here, purple, I guess, is still part of Bemidji now, right? Okay, so we have kind of an L shape here, the remaining township. Would this city engage all of that? Would that be our new borders? This, whatever is left, would it potentially be just a part of that? Don't want to leave anybody hanging out. So
We have no intention of leaving any part out or
Yeah.
letting some part go. The
Okay.
intention of the whole township.
interesting shape for a
Yep.
city, but anyway, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Secondly, does the name change? Northern Minnesota? Well, that's a pretty big area.
It's kind of funny you say that. I've thought about that before, but that's not something we've talked about yet. But there's a possibility, it's
It's not the most important question.
no, but it's something that it's a true question. Yeah. Anybody else right now for questions? Yes, ma'am.
Lisa Boulay, I live in Lavinia. If we were annexed to the city, would our taxes most likely go up?
Who wants to answer?
I don't know. I've looked at it before, and I would say it's safe to say yes, they would absolutely go up. The question is how much. When we've looked at it before, I mean, I don't think it's unreasonable to say your taxes would almost double. There's a lot of things that would be different.
And I don't want to speak for the city. We're not here to badmouth the city, but I mean, the city's even acknowledged that more than likely they're going to go up. And I think you talked to residents who have been annexed recently on some of the junipers and some of the areas right south of Lakewood. I think the general consensus is they've gone up pretty significantly. Yeah, just one second. Do you have a question? Go ahead, Joyce.
Donna Schrader, if we became a city, would there be more funding available for us for the water and sewer and those sort of things?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Well, I think we're hopeful there's more avenues for us to check out if we are a city compared to a township. Just some of those that he listed there are some of the fundings that are available to cities that aren't available to townships. Do we get it automatically? No, we still have to go after it, but there are more avenues to go after.
And those typical funding sources are for the city and water to help, or not specifically?
It's not specifically, it's for that and others. I mean, there's other things you go after money for as well.
Yeah, there's not, I don't think it's specified for any one thing, but that is one of the things that, that we would probably be looking at utilizing some of that possible money for, very likely. Yes, sir.
Daniel Barr, 745 Lonnie Court. What's the anticipation of what legal fees would be to?
Yeah, that's a great question. Don't know for sure. What I can tell you is what we have heard from the recent ones that went through it. And their best guess, without, getting all kinds of receipts and whatnot, is that they thought it probably cost anywhere, like $50,000 kind of range. And the majority of that is going to be in legal fees. We're going to have to pay our lawyer to do a lot of work for us, and then filing with the courts and whatnot. But don't know a hard and fast number I could tell you, but I'm sure that that's probably a ballpark.
Yes, sir.
Martin Rees, 921 Maple Ridge, just north here, Ridge Court. Another question related to water and sewer. We moved here 6 years ago from a community in northern Minnesota that went through some ambivalence and conflict with regard to water and sewer. In short, townships required an upgrade, a significant upgrade of all individual sewer systems. And shortly followed by annexation, the grass had hardly grown on the excavation when those residents next did to abandon the new sewer out of the city. My question is, are we able, do you anticipate that we would be able to make those decisions as a town? Or would there be, and this is where it gets prophetic, would there be federal and state mandates that would reach in and result in that kind of thing in more densely populated areas of the town?
Mike, do you know from the past?
Can't answer specific, but in general, we anticipate those that are on private systems will stay on private systems. If and when municipal systems would come available, even the portion that we're talking about now from Lakewood, or excuse me, from Northwoods up to the state park, there will be a availability of a phase-in situation, so that if you have an upgraded system and is compliant, you do not need to hook up to the new system immediately. It might be, maybe we're saying it's a 5, 10, 15, or 20-year period, or if and when there's an issue with your system. So even inside, you're just thinking inside the city limits. Inside the city limits of Bemidji right now, there's many, many areas that aren't served by city water and sewer. And there isn't any move to force them into doing that, as long as they're compliant and not polluting. According to, they fall under JPB regulations like we do right now in the township. That'll come back to the township. But if we have non-compliant systems in the township, we want to know about it so we get them up to compliance. Sure. But being forced to hook up to a municipal system, first off, the likelihood of us having a municipal system throughout the township in the foreseeable future is pretty minimal.
Thank you.
And the one thing with that kind of following up too is, one question we did ask is, when you become a city, is there new regulations and rules and stuff you have to follow as a city resident, basically? And there is really no rules. It's based on densities and it's based on things. It's not just because you're a city resident, you live in a city, now there's new rules that you automatically have to abide by. As far as our research has shown, there's nothing of that sort that we've seen that's not the case. Yes, sir.
David Pecora, I live on Beltree Drive. I think the responsibility of any government entity is public safety, number one. He had mentioned Beltrami County Sheriff would provide law enforcement. And then I assume the Bemidji Fire Department would provide fire service. And there is a fire station right from Bemidji Fire built a half mile from here, I believe it is.
Rural fire built, yes.
Rural fire,
Yes.
okay. The trucks are there, but probably there's no personnel in there. Just the trucks are there, the hoses, but no personnel. And then concerning EMS, we have the Bemidji Ambulance Service in the entire county, which has been in existence for over 50 years. And in that initial charter, it stipulated that only one ambulance had to be in service for Hubbard County, that they cover part of that, and then the entire Beltrami County. So with that one ambulance in service for the entire county, it's just a concern of mine with public safety, the long response times. Would Bemidji Ambulance continue to provide services with their own ambulance for the entire county and for Hubbard? Or would there be some stipulations to possibly have them increase the number of ambulances available since the population is growing?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, and you guys maybe can speak. Bemidji Ambulance isn't, just to make sure people understand, it's not a city of Bemidji ambulance. It's a private entity. So I don't think there's any differences as far as to how that goes, that there'd be some rules or something that would change, that they would no longer have an obligation to service our area, and that we would try to find our own private system to do that. Those kind of questions, I guess, honestly, are things that we should be looking at, whether we stay a township or a city, regardless. I mean, to look at, to make sure we have the public safety in place for our residents, which is why, like, I'm sure Kurt can speak to, like, about the rural fire that we're a part of already, and the Bemidji Fire is a part of that fire association, but like I said, I think those things, we don't anticipate changes, but as populations and things change, we could potentially see the future where, if they need to be done, they need to be done. That's going to be based on just a need of the community. Kurt, do you have anything to add about that?
Just speak to the fire department, like 80% of our firefighters are volunteer firefighters. So they're on call, so they wouldn't be at that fire station. We only right now have 7 or 8 full-time firefighters to man all of our fire stations
In the city.
in the city. So at the time there, even with their split shift, there's probably even only 2 there at one time. And then when the bell goes off, they respond from different places. So again, it is something that we're always working on and trying to increase that staff. But as we speak right now, we're down about 10 members. Having a trouble sometime finding firefighters to take those positions. So I mean, if that will change, I can't answer that question. But again, it will be tougher to man all of these fire stations when our staff is 80% volunteers. So.
I guess my major concern is Allstate can replace a house, but they can't replace a 3-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
So my major concern is emergency medical service. And again, we just have one ambulance required for the entire county. Part of health. Huge area. I just wanted to, maybe you're already aware of that. I'm just.
No. It's yeah, I guess I wasn't exactly, but that's a good point to bring up, and it's something that the community as a whole should be addressing. So, like I said, that's an issue regardless, something we should be looking at regardless. The questions right now. Just 1 second, Dan. Is there anybody else who hasn't spoken yet who wants to speak before we start coming back around? Go ahead, Dan.
In the past, we had tried doing this and we were told we couldn't do it to avoid annexation. So how realistic do you think, I'd like the board to say, how realistic, and I don't mean to put you on the spot. Maybe I do.
Yep, that's fine.
But how realistic do you think that it could fly this time?
So you just want to answer that.
I can go first, and if you guys want to pipe in too, feel free. So quite honestly, this is just my personal opinion, but I think that we stand very, very good chances. Nothing's for certain. And probably the biggest reason why is I just look at the recent ones that were successful. And like I said, we'll hope to get this up on the web so you can look at it too if you want. You read through it and it sounds like us. They clearly listed there that they had some annexation concerns. They kept losing parts of their township. And, I mean, we obviously have the same thing going on here. You look at the services that they provide, same as us. You look at the populations, really big, just like us. I just don't really see a difference between us and them. So I'm optimistic, again, if you're just asking me for my opinion. Else had any?
I guess I'll just say too that one thing that I guess I look at it, Northern Township is not like a rural little township without commercial businesses and a lot of stuff going on here. Something that was brought up earlier today was that we were talking about we have businesses and destinations, people who come here to use our restaurants and use our golf courses and stuff that are all on our township property. When you start having those things going on, that's what LGA is for, to help with those. So the burden of all these resources that we have here aren't put solely on the taxpayers. The same thing with the city of Bemidji. That's where they have that aid to help them with that burden as a township. And as we grow, as we keep it being a commercial center, that makes sense to what we have to offer and what we are as a township right now. We're not what we used to be 15, 20 years ago. We are getting to be more urban in a lot of areas. But with that being said, we also want to decide where we want to be urban and where we want to have business and where we want to have more rural areas. And we think that's why planning and zoning is important to come back to us. So we can pick those areas, decide where we want to have a commercial corridor, decide where we want to have multifamily residential and more dense population bases, and where we want to let people still have 2-acre parcels, but that's what planning and zoning is for. But with that being said, though, we are definitely not what we were 15 years ago. Add, Mike?
Dan, I'd like to address it because, again, because of the many years of sitting here and being in the township and with you and serving and so on, we probably made mistakes in the past because we didn't take the initiative before that 3 phases of annexation happened. We listened to what was being told to us. We kind of took a back seat thinking we couldn't do it. we shouldn't do it, maybe we wouldn't be successful, maybe it wasn't what the township wanted. Well, now we've lost a big hunk of our township. We're looking at losing another hunk of our township. If we don't spend $50,000 to $100,000 on whatever that number is, and we don't make an effort now, we're not gonna have to worry about this decision in another 10 years, because that decision is gonna be made. And I live on South Lake Mobile. I do not want a Bemidji address. Not now or not in the future. So I think, what are the chances? But I feel very comfortable, at least we're taking the right step by trying.
Yes, ma'am.
Carla Mandrell Lane. So this would all come down to one person, one judge would make the decision for all of us? After all your paperwork,
Yeah.
doing everything that you're doing, submitting it, one person would have our future in their hands.
That is correct, yeah. And I don't think that that's how the law always used to be, but in say the past 10, 15 years, it has changed, so it's just a single administrative judge. And I think this is one of the big things that she does. So she just weighs the case, gets a sense of the community, tries to do what's best, of course, for the community. But like you said, at the end of the day, it's one person making a decision that affects a lot of people.
Yes, sir.
Arlen Strobel and Wobble. The main reason for this meeting, I take it, is so that the city doesn't annex us. That's the main reason why you're doing this, correct? And how are you gonna handle planning and zoning when it's been going through the city all these years? You're gonna have to have a full-time staff on that,
Well,
correct?
yes.
And that's gonna be an add-on. But how about the people along the lake that would like to be hooked up to water and sewer someday? A township, I've been on the township for 50 years in northern Minnesota, but a township, you can't afford, or will you be able to think you're gonna have enough money to put a water and sewer system in? You know, someday the state might come and say, you can't have mountain systems, you can't have this. How are you gonna afford that? Maybe the city can't afford it either. I'm not saying yes or no, you know, but I'm just saying, there's a lot of questions to ask.
Good questions. I want to answer the planning and zoning issue first. We do serve as, joint planning and zoning with the city right now. Previously, we had planning and zoning in Northern Township before the orderly annexation and planning and zoning merged. We're just bringing planning and zoning back to Northern Township, regardless of what happens as far as moving forward with this portion. Planning and zoning is most likely coming back to Northern Township within the next 2 years. That's our term that we have left on the contract. We're fully capable of handling it. Our budget right now for joint powers, we pay about just north of $50,000 to belong to joint powers for that basic. Plus, we lose about $50,000 plus in fees that are being collected in Northern Township over the last 3 years. That's an average, $50,000 plus. That gives us north of $100,000 to bring on planning and zoning back into the township with no increase in our budget. We certainly can do it for $100,000. And we know our fees are going up. We've already been requested for 20% increase for next year if we stay in planning and zoning, and we get nothing else other than the services we're getting right now. So fiscally, we have to bring planning and zoning back home where we have better control. The water and sewer issue, we're taking steps through our grant process, through bonding and so on, same as the city was going to do, to try to start with municipal services on the north side of the lake. It's going to take some time, but we at least have the city on board as stating that they will allow us to hook up to the city water and sewer once we get our lines in place. So, can we go out and bond and have the whole township pay for water and sewer on a portion of Lake Bemidji? Probably is not going to fly right now. I don't think people up in the northwest corner want to pay for the south side of Lake Bemidji. So that's something that is moving forward.
Yeah, so that is like the state bonding that we've been applying for those for a while. What we applied for, I don't know if some of you guys have already heard about this. We applied last year for with the state bonding bill for this pipe to go basically in the ground up to the state park. We had very good progress, but as I think people who watch the politics, no bonded mill got passed, period. We also applied with a federal level. We're going to be applying again this January again, regardless of what happens here with Incorporation. I mean, we're gonna do this regardless because we think it's important to take care of Lake Bemidji. We just think that's what we need to do. And there's people who need it. We know Rutgers is a need for it. The state park, the DNR need it. There's a number of residents who live in that area who need it, who are having to buy parcels across the road because they don't have enough property in their own place to put a drain field. So that's gonna happen no matter what. But like I said, we also realize that that's not attainable for any one person to just go ahead and pay for that line. It's a long line, and there's not a lot of areas to really feed when you're going along the lake with what's there. So we know we need assistance, and as would the city, if they went through this process, they'd be doing the exact same thing, asking for state bonding. I can almost guarantee they would have to go that route too. Yes, ma'am.
Amy Lane, I live on Alder Street. One of the steps in the process that you had was that you have to garner support from neighboring cities. I don't see the city of Bemidji supporting this move. I think it would be definitely, because they lose opportunity to grow their tax base. How do you plan on garnering support from the city of Bemidji and other neighboring communities to get through that hoop of the process?
Yes, I'll answer it.
That's one of the things, we've been working with them on this sewer line up everybody's talking about wanting to protect the lake, which isn't just for the city of Bemidji. It isn't just for Northern Township. It's for the entire region, basically. So they've said they're on board with being supportive for that and wanting to get this done for the good of the lake. And if we can be cooperative on that, they can support us on these kinds of things. Will there be resistance? There may be. Yep. I wouldn't be surprised, but they've supported our bonding bills, our grant applications and that kind of thing, saying that they're on board with this because it's important. It's more important than what's the most important thing about our cooperative project was saving Lake Bemidji. So kind of hope that they'll hold to that.
I think it was kind of alluded, I don't know if somebody said it or not today, or if it's been earlier today. Our only reason for wanting to become a city can't just be because we just want to avoid annexation. That can't be the whole reason. We have other reasons too. I mean, we could have done that 30 years ago, but there's other reasons because of who we are. Likewise, the city can't just go to an administrative law judge and say, we don't want them to become incorporated because we want to be able to annex them in the future. I mean, they're going to have to give reasons why they don't think that we belong a city. And I don't really know what basis they have. I mean, they can come up with stuff, I'm sure they can try, but I don't know what those are. I don't. Chris or Mike, do you have any thoughts on that too? Or Kurt?
Nothing different.
Yeah.
Did the judge already go into this thinking that the city's not gonna agree with it? She's already, I'm sure, seen this.
I would assume that,
If she didn't think that, she would probably be thinking that, of course, there's gonna be some resistance. from the city.
There's some places, yeah, I'm sure they do. Sure, Muriel.
Yeah, Kurt Gilman, I live on East Mobile. I'm curious if you discussed, if you were incorporated or possibility that you could annex other townships or parts of other townships. Has that been discussed? And would you be interested in that? Why not?
You want to try it?
I can speak to,
Yeah.
I guess it's possible, but that is not our interest. That is not our interest right now. We have never discussed wanting to grab anybody else's land.
Well, case in point, I live on East Mobile and I'm about maybe 6 houses from the Northern Township line. And then the dead end road becomes Turtle Lake Township. And it's kind of a orphan, if you will, by itself up there. And the only way to get to it is to go through Northern. So that was the property I was.
Yeah.
A little tax base.
Yeah, that's one of those things too. You have to be willing to able to offer something that township can offer, whether that means zoning and ordinances and stuff. You have to be able to offer that, whether it's services of some sort, whether it's got to be something you have to offer to an organization before you can legally do that. People can always request, and like, so could the people here could have requested to become city. I'm sure certain people have in the past requested to become city residents. It happens in Bemidji Township every now and then there'll be a little parcel here and there that'll become annexed into the city because they've requested to be annexed. So that does happen. But that's not what this is about. That's not what we're really interested in that. I mean, that's just not,
Yeah, it's okay.
yeah, appreciate it. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Justin Fournier, I live up on Chad Drive, pretty close to where I think maybe the new downtown's gonna be. I'm curious if I'm gonna be in a downtown residence soon. That's my major concern. Is there any long-term like plan on where's City Hall gonna be? Where's a city park gonna be? I mean, it sounds like my taxes are gonna go up, not down, actually. So, is there any long-term plans on how this northern city is gonna look? Because, like I said, this must be downtown, right? Is Northern School gonna be part of it?
Sure.
No, I think we went into this thinking, and everyone's wishes are to keep things pretty much the same. I think that's been our ambition from the beginning on this thing. No one's looking at making this, I think somebody mentioned Bemidji too. We're not looking for a main street, a downtown. We're not looking to provide park services that they have in the city of Bemidji, those types of things. So we're not looking to grow that way.
But when I think of a city, I think for any small town, I see a little downtown area. I see a city, there's a little post office and all that. We already got Dollar General, so I'm thinking this is
Yeah.
Something else.
Yeah.
Exactly. And
There's no long-term plan here. It's just like, what's going on?
I think what we're trying to do here, when we talk about planning and zoning, that's part of what we need to do. Like when we talk about the idea of like, why we talk about bringing planning and zoning back to Northern Township rather than keeping part of the JPB, because we decided as a town board that we thought it was better for the Northern Town Board individually to decide where we want to have a rural section, where, like I said, where we want to have multifamily areas, where we want to have like a business district. And right now you can't really call it, it's not really a business, but you look at what's happening here by Northdale, well, that's kind of more commercial. There's more stuff happening there. They put up some nice facilities there and some storage. And right out here, there's been things, there's areas where that's working and where that seems to make sense. There's areas where we don't want that at. And that's what we want to decide where that's going to be. We want to decide with our planning commission, with our planning board, which would be the board here, or the new town council or whatever it would be, to make those decisions ourselves about where that's going to be at. And we just had a recent case that came up just with some rezoning right over here off Fairgrounds Road, where we rezoned some properties commercial, some properties multifamily residential. And it went to the Joint Powers Board and we agreed with the decision. But on the same side though, I think we feel that we want to make those decisions individually. We just think that as we are, we don't need to make those with the city influence on it too. We're at a minority section there, so that's kind of on a different topic as far as joint planning and zoning, but we don't anticipate trying to make something into something that it's not. We want to stay a rural community. That's why people live here. We know that, and that's what it's being developed for up in these different areas up off Whiting Road and some of these areas that have been, it's a kind of a little almost suburban feel in a way, but it's rural too, and we want to keep that. I do anyways, that's my goal.
You know, currently, under joint planning, we have a comprehensive plan for the whole area, for the city of Bemidji and for this. There's a comprehensive plan which looks at road corridors, looks at business corridors and so on and so on. When we bring joint planning back to the township, we'll probably bring that plan back with us. Okay, so the majority of that is already set. I mean, we're gonna tweak it. We're gonna, you know, specifically, you know, tailor some areas for the township. But it's not gonna be like what you were envisioning. There won't be a downtown over at Chad Drive. I know that. This might be the main strip out here, but it won't be over in Chad Drive. And, yeah, we're not looking for a big municipal, you know, city hall. We just did redo with ARP money, we just redid our shop out here. So we have a heated shop for our new plow truck this year, which we didn't have before. So we're looking at some infrastructure changes and that's gonna happen. Will taxes go up? Gentleman earlier said I would be naive to say taxes aren't gonna go up. But I can tell you, the city of Bemidji's share of taxes went up 10% last year and they're looking at another 8 or 10% increase this year in city taxes. Northern Township, even with this annexation issues that have happened to us, you look at your township taxes, our budget stayed the same for the last like 3-4 years. We haven't touched it. But what has gone up is we're shrinking. The township has shrunk, but we gained some people back, because of our new growth. But, things are gonna change. But at least we'll have a shot at some additional funding through through small cities grants and things like that we don't have in our availability now.
Thank you for that. Additional questions right now? Yeah. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Vern Holstater, and I live on Grove Street. You referenced several townships who've recently become municipalities. Have you personally talked to those people? Find out if they've had unforeseen consequences? Because everything I do in my life has an unforeseen consequence. So that's what I'm curious about. Is there something they haven't seen coming?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I reached out to the mayor of Credit River recently, had a really good discussion. He was very positive about hearing what we're doing up here. Really, the big takeaway I took away from our conversation is that he says this process is very doable. So that was very nice to hear. And I think that's going to be a good resource just moving forward. We'll keep that contact going. Somebody in the first session actually had a really good suggestion too, is to maybe reach out to somebody who went through this process like 15 years ago, and then find out like what were some of the things that they had, as immediate problems, issues, and then what's happened since then too. And I think that's a really good idea. We'll probably be doing the same thing there. There's a list of these so we can find out who to contact. But yes, we have made contact and continued to, plan on doing more.
Someone else over there who had a question?
If I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so you've talked quite a bit about the comprehensive plan, and you've talked about the counselors of a potential city. Who else would you involve in reviewing and amending that comprehensive plan? Because I'd like to see, if we were to become a city, lots of input
Sure.
into that comprehensive plan.
Sure. Were you involved in the last comprehensive plan, Chris, at the JPB or not?
Yeah, hello there.
So I guess, I don't know, unless Mike, do you want to talk about it? Else I can do it.
The bulk of that process initiates with the planning commission. Usually the planning commission will start to review the ordinances and so on. Then they hold the planning commission, usually, which we have in Northern Township, we have members that are on the joint planning commission. They conduct the meetings, they bring in the public, they do the research, and then they tend to put it all back together and present it to the planning board for final approval. But there is a process involved. And like I said, I think the bulk of it is in place right now. We're not going to be starting from scratch by any means, but we will have to tweak it for what we want in Northern.
So,
I do know, I'm sorry, I'll say one more thing for it. And then one thing about this process that does happen with these, we generally have tried to have open sessions. They're not always very well attended. And we've tried to have these in the past where they would, at the JPB level, they would have these up when they did the last comp plan about 5-6 years ago. They would have a session basically where they would try to get input from the public, from people just open to anybody. I don't know how well it was advertised, so I'm not going to say that it wasn't probably maybe very well put out there. But I think that would be my goal again, was to do something similar, to have before the planning commission and everybody kind of sits together and have the public kind of brainstorm together about what do they see, get ideas. It doesn't have to be a real big process, it's just an evening or an afternoon to kind of go through those things and kind of talk about it. Sure.
well, my remembrance was that I was on a group that looked at certain chapters. And we were targeted and invited, which I think that's critical. To say you have an open session.
Yeah.
But I think that I can buy into that more if I know that there's public input and it's not just 5 guys that are making decisions.
No.
I'm tired.
No, I get it. No, I think that's a fair thing. Like, so that's a good idea. I do remember it's been a while, so I don't remember exactly, but I do know there was things out there, but you're probably right that maybe it is better to do it that way too. So that's a good, I'll make a note.
My name's Andy, Wallville. I just want to point out that a lot of this is based off of trust. You can tell a lot of the questions and the attitudes. And I just want to point out that if the people of the township here are not trusting of you guys, that's kind of funny, because you'd all be putting yourself out of your position if it goes through.
Yep.
So it's kind of stupid for us to sit back here and say, I don't trust you guys. So it's kind of dumb.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to be
Yeah.
rude in some of the questions, but I'm just telling you, if that's what you're thinking,
Yeah.
why would they want to give up their position if they're so power hungry? So,
That's, I agree. That's my true thought. I mean, I don't.
just
we
try to
all-
be logical.
Okay. Go ahead, ma'am. I think you were first in.
Kristen Long, I was looking at your flow chart of the process here and at the public meeting, you know, what we're doing today and what we'll do in the near future. Determine, is there a more formal, you know, when it comes down to that flow chart, you know, us trying to reach out to these other communities to get their support, is there something that we can do that's more formal of what, how much does what we want weigh into it? Is there a way to do a more formal tally of what the constituents in the township really want? And is, I mean, I don't know, throwing it out, is it more of a vote? Is it more of a, you know, something more formal where people can, we actually have a good idea of yay and nay?
Yeah. You want to answer that, or do you want?
You know, the way we understand the process is that this can be done by, just by a resolution of the board. It can move forward with just a resolution of the board. This town board absolutely doesn't feel that way. We really feel that we needed to have these meetings, get some input, try to figure out the questions of the things we don't know, try to get new ideas. We did that last year at the fairgrounds, and we really had a good takeaway from that meeting, and it helped us get to this point. But as far as a formal vote, yes, we could kick this down the road and have the residents make a formal vote, and it could be no, but the town board could still, in their wisdom, decide that it's a good thing. You understand? Or not a good thing. It could be overwhelming and they could vote the other way. So this is a critical time, and we really do appreciate the comments, verbal, written, and otherwise.
And I think there'll be a couple opportunities for that. You know, there will be that hearing with the judge where people could have some influence again. We are trying to get a tally too of, you know, questionnaire to see how many people think this is a good process. And we're not hearing from everybody in the township, but there's been a whole lot of people that have been interested enough to show up in these two meetings. It says a lot. And so we're going to get a pretty good feel for what people think. And that will probably be part of our proposal when we put it forward. So what kind of public support we got.
And to add to that, there are a lot of people here, and there were a lot of people at the first meeting, but this letter that brought you to this meeting went out to over 1,500 people, asking them for a response, either come to this meeting or give us an email or let us know. So we are trying to get the answer from anybody that wants to give us their opinion on it. So we're trying to get that.
1,500 households, yeah, so Kurt's right, 1,500 households, so, but, there's somebody over there, I think, who hadn't had a chance to speak yet.
Seems as though this meeting, being where we're at, as a result of what took place maybe last year, where it was overwhelming that people didn't want to be part of the city.
Yep.
I think that's correct, and you, as the town board, have responded to that. And have said, okay, want to maintain a rural atmosphere and not be annexed. This is about the only way we can do that. So that the future of Northern Township, Northern City, whatever it is in our hands and not in somebody else's hands. And to be able to maintain that rural type of atmosphere rather than to be annexed into. So it seems like that's the reason we're here, and that you have gone to this work to see if this means that you could do that. And this seems realistic. Now we're afraid of becoming part of the city, you know, because we didn't want to be annexed into a city. But it's maybe part of the intent or part of even the charter can talk about maintaining some type of rural atmosphere rather than becoming a metropolitan area. I don't know.
One thing I want to say is I want to make very sure that nobody takes, we have nothing negative to say. I'm not being negative about the city one bit. The city, people want to live in the city, and that's great. That's a wonderful thing there's a lot of amenities and a lot of things that offer to being a city resident, and that's people's choice to live there. Many of you folks have chosen to live here because you wanted something different than living in the city. So we're trying to abide by that and realize, okay, you've chosen to live in our community for a reason. So now how do we try to protect that and to make sure you get to keep what you already have? I agree, that is the way that we look at it, but there's been things that have kind of compounded on this that have led us to making this decision. That meeting a year ago was one of those things. Yes, sir.
Joe Chesky from Pearl Drive. I'm sitting here thinking through scenarios about how this plays out, short term, 5-10 years. Laid out a very good scenario, starting off with a level of service that is similar to what we have now. Staffing wise, purchase services, quite honestly, looks very similar to what the city of Black Duck has, their staffing. In a lot of ways, number of staff. The thing I'm curious about is, we're already getting a taste here tonight of people starting to think about expanded services or wanting new things because we are a city. How long can you maintain that level of being staffed at a city of Black Duck's level? We've got 6 to 7 times that population ready to start. I don't know that it's going to be able to last that long before you have to ramp up pretty significant.
I guess I'll say, Joe, that's part of the reason, seeing where we're at right now, that's part of the reason why we're making this decision to go forward as a city, realizing that that path has already started. That's already started to happen. We saw this growth, and we realized that if we're going to be able to maintain the services that our residents want, we need to have accessibility to that local government aid that's made by the cities and different things that are out there, because we know that if we're going to still provide what we have, and if the community is going to continue to grow as it has, we need to be able to, we should have access to that funding, because I mean, we're acting, I think it was brought up to by our attorney, one of the things that they want to know if you're going to become a city, are you acting like a city? And we feel like we are, we feel like we already are. So why not take advantage of the stuff, of the resources that are out there for us? Do we have anything else to? I agree, Joe. Thank you, Joe. Yes, ma'am.
The only thing that I can say, the people I know who were annexed or annexed, whichever is the correct pronunciation, did not, they told me they weren't happy. They did not see any real increase in services, just increases in taxes. Yeah, and regulation.
Yes, ma'am. Did you have any comment for her? Go ahead, yes, no.
Nick Thompson, I live on Town Hall Road. Mike, I agree with your comments. Nobody has a crystal ball. Nobody can see the future. But what happens 10 years down the road? In my mind, I don't like the scenarios of thinking 10 years down the road of doing nothing. So I appreciate the efforts to try to move forward and try to maintain this city or township is what it is now.
Thank you, sir.
If there's 4,500 residents in this area and you only sent out 1,500 letters.
1,500 households, not, yeah, I'm sorry, that's, yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. So this, good, yes, sir.
Dale Long. I'm just curious, you had said we'll still have like the sheriff department, the fire department and stuff, but what about a postal service, or what about schools?
I don't, do you know anything about that, Chris, when you were doing, I think with the research of what you found, is there any changes to any of those things?
No, I don't think much would change. I mean, Mike had some more details on the postal service especially too.
The postal thing is a good question. Currently we're served by 56601 with the Bemidji Post Office. If we became our own city and we were big enough, we could have our own postal code and hence end up with our own post office and so on. Highly unlikely. The post office right now is servicing a large area, other than the cities that were already incorporated. And they've lost their post offices. Many of them are going out. So it's the 10 by the postal service, which really calls the shots in this. they decide whether you get to have one or not. We would have to petition and want to do that as far as postal. District 31 pretty much decides where the schools are going to be built, as we've learned. And you know, that's its, you know, that's its own taxing authority, just like the airport. So that wouldn't change. We're a member of rural fire, folks, and we're a large supporting of rural fire. Our dues at rural fire this year are going to be real close to, that Northern Township residents pays, are going to be real close to $175,000 out of our budget. We're fortunate to have the fire hall, even though it's not staffed full-time. There's four fire stations, and the only one that's staffed full-time all the time at a low level is the main fire hall downtown. So at least we have equipment, and we have 2 new pieces of equipment coming, one at the end of this month and one at the first quarter of next year, that rural fire, you paid for. So that takes care of rural fire. Our police protection, we will continue to work with Beltrami County for police protection. We have no idea that we're gonna have our own police force. Like, I know Black Duck occasionally will hire a police officer from Beltrami County, or, you know, they'll do it cooperatively like that. We may get to that point, but what happens in 10 years, you know, I don't know. But I do know what happens in 10 years if we don't do anything, and it won't be 10 years, because we're gonna have less township to deal with. We're gonna have a higher budget regardless. We've been requested by the city to meet with them about 2 issues. One is, I mean, they keep pushing for total annexation or / a merger of the township with the city. The last discussion just recently was, would we meet with them on a merger? Would this town board sit down with the city and meet on a merger? Well, we went back to what Mr. Glidden said. No, we were told by our people a year ago, no way, Jose.
Yes, sir.
I'm Douglas Henry. I live on Bunchberry Lane. I think some of the same questions are getting asked over again, and I would like to see a division of the House so we can move this meeting along, because we're getting into some of the same questions again. Like fire.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Thank you. Yes, sir.
I'd like to commend the board for moving forward from the meeting that we had at the fairground. I think you've done a great presentation, a lot of sense, and answered a lot of questions. I think it's time to find out, you know, other questions can come to find out what to do. Thank you.
Well, and as we said, you know, one thing, if you fill out that little card, you know, when you leave here today, what your thoughts are. This is no scientific poll. We're just trying to get a sense. The first meeting today, we didn't get a lot of sense that there was people really interested in saying, no, just keep it the way it is. We're looking for the same thing tonight. So we look forward to questions if you have something. And if you're not comfortable asking the question, please leave it on the paper and we'll try our best to answer it somehow.
I think this gentleman to my left has raised the point.
Yep.
And although we do have these cards.
Yeah.
That's giving our pleasure, yea or nay.
Yeah.
And it does give us a little bit of anonymity.
Mhm.
The gentleman feels, and I concur, that I don't need such anonymity. Would like to give it the opportunity to let my pleasure be known
Well,
by taking.
we can. The one thing I'll say about that is, and to be fair, I felt like there was a couple residents at the last meeting that came afterwards and they didn't feel comfortable when they were like, okay with that session. So that's fine. I'm just saying that's why we haven't done that, but, yeah, but.
There we go.
So-
Let's do it. They're not asking. Let's do it.
Go ahead. You guys go.
All right, let's see who's for it. Come on. If you're for, you might put your hand up. Otherwise, they're gonna think you're not for it. They're still going. Come on, might as well. And that might.
Well, like I said, it's kind of the sense we've gotten today, so I appreciate that. Any other questions for anybody that they have anything else they want to address? Yes, sir. 1 second, folks. I think we still have another question from another gentleman back here. Sure. I'm sorry, folks, just for one. Excuse me. There's a question. Let's let him talk quick before we, so please.
If we were to incorporate, what type of city would we?
I don't think there's a different type. It's just basically there's a city or not. Is there something, was there different levels of city or not, Chris? I don't think it really becomes.
Well,
Okay.
Those were the two
He is,
different
he
types.
he is correct.
Okay.
You're absolutely correct.
I guess I'm not familiar yet with that. I don't know. So we have, that's something we'll have to do some research on and see exactly what that is. Okay. So this, so Mary said that there's two types. There's one a home rule and there's another type. And the attorney that we spoke with just about the ideas, he suggested the opposite, not the home rule. So we'd have to get some more research on that. That's a question that we'll find out on.
In that one, all of the council people would be at large. We wouldn't have wards. They would all be at large members representing everybody.
Good question.
Any additional questions, folks? If not, yes, sir, go.
Okay, about that Cottle Drive, we've heard pros. Is there a downside? And what are some of the top reasons why you wouldn't want to incorporate?
Just, I guess just the cost of it.
Yeah.
And there's a cost associated with trying to put it together.
Other than that, there's no real long-term.
No, I mean, there's really, the only far-fetched out there thing was, sometimes it's administrative law judges do weird things, but that's not something that that's been a long time happening. So that's not something that we really can't worry about if they decide to say, you know what, you should just become part of a major. We don't anticipate that happening. But that's a downside, is the only downside that I can think of, was you're putting your trust in a decision by one person, but you really don't have another choice. It's really, what's your other choice? So it's, like I said, it's a negative, but it's. So. Yes, Maria.
Well, I chatted with a couple of attorneys and, that a city has more power than a township. So they could decide to have a sales tax in northern, whatever city you're gonna call it. And, I think that's a downside. I mean, to me, more power doesn't necessarily translate to good. So, just.
Yep, that's a good point. Thanks, Maria. Yes, sir.
Ryan Grove, Norway Court. Myself, like many in the room here, pretty big outdoor people. Four-wheeling, hunting, snowmobiling, we have all those trails, different things in our township. Would that be impacted? Has that been a thought of if we're incorporated? I mean, I know there's a lot of landowners in this room and that aren't in this room that come this weekend would be enjoying deer hunting on their land. Is that going to change?
No, that was one of the first things I asked the attorney. Is there anything that comes with becoming a city that automatically puts types of ordinances in place? And he said, no, there's not. That doesn't mean a township or a city couldn't pass ordinances that prevented you from hunting, but this township wouldn't, and that's no one's intent. Everybody's intent was for this to stay similar. So nothing automatically comes with city.
Yeah. Yep. Anything else? I guess if there's nothing else, go ahead. Yes, please.
Yeah. So I understand there's a lot of very good things that come with this, but at a cost.
Yes.
Do we have any general idea of what that percent increase?
Tax increase?
Yeah.
Yeah, for the cost of all of that.
I don't think there's extras the cost. When I was talking cost, I was talking the process, the attorney fees and things to get it processed. As far as additional costs, we don't know. We don't know if the taxes will go up or not, but taxes should stay the same as they are in the township right now.
Oh, so we are thinking that the taxes stay
We're
relatively
hopeful.
the same.
We're hopeful.
That's what we'd
Yes.
like to do.
Yes.
Like we said, there'd be the one thing Kurt was referencing is there's a one-time expense to doing this, which, we don't want to spend $100,000, but more than likely we'll have to make some sacrifices, maybe on a road project that we would like to do. Might have to be pushed off because we have to spend money elsewhere. That's something that could happen, that we might have to make that decision, and it is an expense that's going to come from someplace else. That's real.
Last comments?
Anybody have any final comments? Any final questions? Otherwise, like I said, yes, sir.
I think everyone needs to understand that, say you people become the city council for Northern City, at the next election cycle, that could change, and those new people could change the makeup of, they might have a whole different vision for Northern and take the township in a direction that this group doesn't like. you're susceptible to every election down the road and the visions of those people that get elected. So it's the same with the township.
And that's what we're trying to do, is to try to represent the vision that you folks have given us to lead, and that's all that we can do. I mean, that's
You know,
really,
I wonder what the people of Baxter felt like 30 years ago. Did they try to do the same thing? And now look what they have, you know, as people with money come in and take over, and now Baxter is probably bigger than Brainerd. Are we gonna become a Baxter? You don't know what the future councils are gonna do.
we don't, and those things could happen whether we make this decision or not, and that's the reality of it. It's, you know, it's, whether we decide to go, I mean, you're right, you guys could call a recall vote as soon as you wanted to and vote us all out. I mean, and vote somebody else in, and they can make a totally different decision, so.
So with that said, you have more power, grassroots power as a township than a city to remain how you are now.
No, the same city elections, I mean, there's gonna be elections for a city
Right.
council.
You're right.
City of
Not if
Northern.
you're annexed, right?
And like, look at the city of Bemidji has an ordinance on how many doggies you can have.
Yes, do you have something you want to add?
So just to kind of, the last thing I'd like to say to the townspeople is that Chris alluded to early on that we're already doing many things that the city is doing or has been doing. This board and the previous boards have really tried to bring the township up to snuff. We have improved our roads. We're continuing to improve our roads. You know, we're spending $600,000 to $800,000 a year over the last 10 years on the road system. And you know, we've remodeled this with our ARP money. You don't notice it, but we've got new bathrooms, new heating, new air conditioning. Everything's been brought up to standard. We put up a new building out here for our new plow truck that serves our roads over in the Lavinia area, especially where we can't get in with our plow trucks. We've done a lot of things in the last 5 to 10 years, knowing that we had to pick up the pace and do more. And I, you know, it's made Northern Township the desirable place to live. People aren't leaving Northern Township. They're moving into Northern Township, but they are leaving the city.
So did the city, can the city force the annexation? Is that what is happening in the past?
Oh, yeah.
Can they force more annexation on Northern Township?
Yes.
Yes.
And the township doesn't have a say?
In instances, yes. Yes, sometimes it does. It doesn't, sometimes it does matter, sometimes it doesn't. Usually the city has the power. The cities do have the power of the townships generally. I mean, there's nothing that ever is like 100% that's the way it is, but generally, look in history, that's the way that the townships don't have a lot of power when it comes to fighting it.
That's the law.
Yep, it's just the law. Yep. Well, if there's nothing else, you guys, like I said, I appreciate, please, if you have any other questions, write them down, but thank you guys very much.